The underestimation, the crystal spires of harmony, seven stretched endlessly into the void, their surfaces reflecting the light of three nearby stars. The massive space station served as neutral ground for the Galactic Federation, and today it hosted one of the most important gatherings in recent memory. Representatives from 47 different species had come together for the Great Integration Summit, where humanity would finally be welcomed as full members of galactic society. In the main conference hall, a symphony of alien voices filled the air. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with gravity fields allowing beings from different worlds to orient themselves comfortably. Floating platforms accommodated those who preferred aerial positions, while the floor contained various atmospheric pockets for species requiring different breathing conditions. Ambassador Thexlar of the Zephyrian Collective adjusted his iridescent wing membranes as he addressed the gathering. His species had been part of the Federation for over 3 millennia, and their wisdom was respected across the galaxy. Fellow beings, his melodic voice carried easily through the Chamber's translation network. We gather today to welcome our newest members, the humans of Earth. A ripple of what could charitably be called polite interest passed through the assembly. The humans had been observed for several decades now, their planet quarantined while the Federation decided whether they were ready for contact. Their recent development of faster-than-light travel had forced the issue. Council Prime Veltar, whose crystalline form sparkled with inner light, projected his thoughts directly into the translation matrix. The humans show promise, certainly. Their rapid technological advancement is noteworthy, though their methods remain crude by our standards. Laughter echoed from various sections of the chamber. The Kentari delegation, tall, insectoid beings with gossamer wings, chittered among themselves. Their representative, Scholar Zeketh, spoke up. Indeed, their reliance on chemical propulsion and nuclear energy seems almost quaint. Do they still use projectile weapons for conflict resolution? More laughter rippled through the hall. Director Volnash of the Hegemony Union, a being that resembled a walking tree with multiple sensory clusters, rustled his bark-like skin in amusement. Our intelligence suggests they still engage in physical combat. Actual hand-to-hand fighting, can you imagine? Most civilized species evolved beyond such primitive behaviors eons ago. The Ethereal Collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field, pulsed with what translated as amusement. Their military technology is particularly fascinating. They've only just discovered particle beam weapons, and their defensive systems rely on crude metal plating rather than proper energy shielding. As the aliens continued their good-natured mockery, none noticed the tall figure in dark blue uniform who had entered the chamber through a side portal. Captain Sarah Chun of the United Earth Marine Corps stood quietly near the entrance, her hands clasped behind her back, listening with the patient attention of someone accustomed to gathering intelligence. Sarah had been selected for this assignment, not just for her military expertise, but for her doctoral degree in xenosociology and her uncanny ability to remain calm under pressure. At 38, she had seen combat on 4 different worlds during humanity's expansion phase, but more importantly, she understood the delicate nature of first contact situations. Ambassador Thexlar spread his wings wider, commanding attention. While we acknowledge the humans' potential, we must also consider their integration challenges. Their species seems particularly prone to violent conflict. Our observations show they've engaged in over 200 major conflicts in just the past century. 200! Scholar Zeketh's antennae twitched with what might have been disbelief. How does a species survive such constant warfare? More puzzling, added Council Prime Veltar, his crystalline form shifting to a concerned amber hue, is their apparent inability to develop proper conflict resolution methods. They still rely on what they call military force rather than civilized negotiation and resource redistribution. Director Volnash's bark rustled thoughtfully. Our analysts believe this stems from their tribal origins. They haven't yet evolved beyond territorial instincts. It's quite primitive, really, but not uncommon among younger species. The Ethereal Collective's representative pulse brighter. What concerns me is their weapon development. They seem to focus entirely on lethality rather than efficiency. Their so-called smart bombs are designed to cause maximum destruction rather than precision targeting. Sarah allowed herself a small smile at that comment, though she kept it hidden. The aliens' intelligence was remarkably poor if they thought humanity's publicly displayed weapons represented their actual capabilities. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Thexlar, we should demonstrate proper military technology to help guide their development. He activated a holographic display showing sleek Zephyrian vessels. Our Harmony disruptors can neutralize an enemy fleet without causing permanent damage. The affected crews experience temporary disorientation, but suffer no lasting harm. Scholar Zeketh clicked his mandibles approvingly and added his own display. The Kentari stasis fields can immobilize entire populations without physical contact. Conflicts can be resolved through negotiation while the aggressors are safely contained. Council Prime Veltar's form brightened with pride as he showed images of crystalline structures. Our resonance weapons can disable technology without harming organic life. Very civilized, very clean. Sarah found herself genuinely impressed by the aliens' technologies, but she was also beginning to understand a fundamental disconnect in their thinking. These beings had apparently developed military technology designed specifically to minimize harm, to end conflicts with the least possible damage to all involved parties. That IT was admirable in its way. It was also completely contrary to every principle of warfare that humanity had ever developed. Director Volnash projected a final image showing what appeared to be a massive tree-like structure in space. Our bioships can simply grow restraining vines around enemy vessels. The crews remain perfectly safe while negotiations proceed. We find this approach far more effective than the humans' crude destruction-based tactics. The gathering murmured approval at this display of advanced, civilized warfare. The ethereal representative pulsed in agreement. Such elegant solutions. The humans will need considerable guidance to reach this level of sophistication. If they can reach it at all, added Scholar Zeketh, some species never evolve beyond their violent origins. Perhaps humanity will require extended supervision before full Federation membership. Ambassador Thexlar was about to respond when he noticed the human figure near the entrance. Ah, it appears our human liaison has arrived. Please approach the center platform. All eyes turned to Sarah as she walked forward, her boots clicking softly against the chamber's adaptive flooring. The sound seemed unusually sharp in the suddenly quiet space. She moved with the measured pace of someone comfortable with being the center of attention, her expression neutral, but alert. Representatives of the Galactic Federation, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation system, I am Captain Sarah Chun, military advisor to the Human Integration Committee. I've been asked to provide insight into human military capabilities and doctrine. Excellent. Ambassador Thexlar's wing membranes fluttered with pleasure. We were just discussing your species' approach to conflict resolution. Perhaps you could explain why humans seem to prefer destructive over constructive military solutions. Sarah paused, considering her words carefully. She had been briefed extensively on Federation culture and understood that these beings genuinely believed they were offering helpful guidance. Their condescension wasn't malicious. It was the natural result of species that had never faced truly existential threats. That's an interesting question, Ambassador, she replied. But before I explain human military doctrine, I'm curious about something. You've shown me weapons designed to minimize casualties, to disable rather than destroy, to preserve life even among your enemies. Naturally, Council Prime Veltar's crystalline form pulsed with righteous satisfaction. What civilized being would design weapons intended to cause unnecessary suffering? Sarah nodded slowly. I see. And in your experience, do your enemies always reciprocate this restraint? Do they also use non-lethal weapons when fighting you? The question caused a stir among the gathered diplomats. Scholar Zeketh's antennae twitched uncertainly. Well, naturally, most conflicts in the Federation follow established protocols. the warfare limitation accords ensure that all participants adhere to civilized standards. Most conflicts, Sarah repeated, but not all. Director Valnash's bark darkened slightly. There have been occasional encounters with pre-civilized species, yes, but such situations are handled by increasing the power of our restraint systems until compliance is achieved. And if increasing power doesn't work, if your enemy refuses to be restrained and continues attacking with lethal force, the chamber fell uncomfortably quiet. The ethereal representative's energy field flickered with what the translation matrix interpreted as confusion. Such a scenario would be unprecedented. No rational being would continue fighting when clearly outmatched. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she began to understand just how sheltered these species had been. They lived in a galaxy where warfare was a civilized endeavor, where even enemies followed rules, where the concept of total war was literally unthinkable. Captain Chun, Ambassador Thexlar said, his melodic voice carrying a note of concern, "You seem to be suggesting that humans have encountered situations where conventional restraint proved inadequate." "Not suggesting, Ambassador. Stating." Sarah's voice remained calm, but something in her tone made several alien diplomats shift uncomfortably. Humans developed our military capabilities because we've faced enemies who didn't share your civilized approach to warfare. Enemies who viewed mercy as weakness, restraint as opportunity, and surrender as merely a chance to regroup and attack again. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Council Prime Veltar managed to project a thought, "Surely you exaggerate. No intelligent species would behave in such a manner." Sarah's smile was cold and entirely devoid of humor. "Ambassador, I think it's time you learned why humans have something called the Geneva Convention, and more importantly, why we needed to write it in the first place." The gathered aliens exchanged uncertain glances as Captain Chen activated her own holographic display. The images that appeared were unlike anything they had seen before, and the expression on the human's face suggested that their education was about to take a very uncomfortable turn as Sarah began to speak again. Her voice carried the weight of a species that had learned warfare not from textbooks or civilized academies, but from the harsh crucible of survival against enemies who showed no mercy and expected none in return. "Let me tell you about restraint and why humans consider our current weapons to be the merciful option." The education, the holographic display activated with a soft hum, and Captain Chen's first image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a simple document, aged and formal, with text in multiple Earth languages. "This," Sarah said, her voice carrying the tone of someone beginning a lecture that would fundamentally change her audience's worldview, "is called the Geneva Convention. It's one of several international treaties that govern how humans conduct warfare." Ambassador Thexlar's wing membranes fluttered with curiosity. "Treaties governing warfare? How fascinating. Do these agreements establish military cooperation between your nations?" "No, Ambassador. These treaties establish rules for how we're allowed to kill each other." The translation systems across the chamber stuttered for a moment, as if struggling to process the concept. Scholar Zekethas and Tenny drooped in confusion. "Rules for killing? I'm afraid I don't understand." Sarah's expression remained perfectly neutral. The Geneva Convention, along with the Hague Convention and several other international agreements, sets boundaries on what methods of warfare are considered acceptable. They define what we call war crimes, actions so horrific that even in the middle of trying to destroy our enemies, we agreed some things were simply too terrible to be permitted. Director Valnash's bark rustled with what might have been distress. "You mean to say that your species naturally engages in methods so destructive that you had to legally prohibit them?" "Naturally." Sarah tilted her head thoughtfully. "No, I wouldn't say naturally. Humans are quite creative when it comes to warfare. We had to keep updating these treaties because people kept inventing new ways to kill that we hadn't thought to ban yet." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices as translation systems worked overtime to convey the growing alarm of the delegates. Council Prime Veltar's crystalline form shifted to a deep red hue. Captain Chun, surely you're speaking in hyperbole. No species would deliberately create increasingly destructive methods of combat. Sarah activated another hologram, this one showing a simple chemical formula. This is mustard gas. It was first used in human warfare in 1917. When deployed properly, it causes severe burns, blindness, and eventually death by drowning as the victim's lungs fill with fluid. It was so effective and so horrifying that both sides in the conflict continued developing even worse chemical weapons. The ethereal representative's energy field flickered rapidly. Both sides? You mean your enemies copied this weapon? Oh, they didn't just copy it. They improved it. That's what I'm trying to explain. Human warfare isn't a civilized disagreement between rational parties. It's what happens when groups of humans decide that their survival depends on making the other group stop existing. Scholar Zeketha's mandibles clicked nervously. But surely your species learned from such terrible experiences. These treaties must have ended such practices. Sarah's smile was grim. The Geneva Convention bans the use of chemical weapons, yes. But do you know why we had to specifically prohibit targeting medical personnel? Because during wars, humans discovered that shooting the doctors and nurses was an effective way to demoralize enemy forces. Had to write that down as a rule. Don't shoot the people trying to save lives. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Finally, Ambassador Thexlar managed to speak, his melodic voice strained. You needed a written rule prohibiting attacks on healers? We needed a lot of written rules, Sarah continued relentlessly. Don't torture prisoners. Don't use prisoners for medical experiments. Don't force captured soldiers to fight against their own side. Don't intentionally target civilians. Don't use expanding bullets designed to cause maximum internal damage. Don't use serrated bayonets. Don't disguise military personnel as medical staff or clergy. With each item on her list, the alien delegates seemed to shrink further into themselves. Director Valnash's bark had turned almost black. Your species engaged in all of these practices, engaged in them, refined them, and in some cases turned them into art forms, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. That's why we needed the rules. And even then, compliance has been inconsistent. Council Prime Veltar's form pulsed weakly. Inconsistent. Well, the thing about war crimes is that they're only crimes if you lose the war. Winners get to write the history books. Sarah paused, studying the increasingly distressed faces around her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me explain why these rules exist by showing you what human warfare looked like before we had them. She activated a new series of holograms, these showing historical battlefields. The images were deliberately chosen to be educational rather than gratuitously violent, but the sheer scale of destruction was impossible to hide. This is the Battle of the Somme 1916. In a single day, human forces suffered 60,000 casualties. The battle lasted 4 months and resulted in over 1 million dead or wounded soldiers. The territorial gain was approximately 6 miles. The numbers seemed to physically impact the alien delegates. The ethereal representative's energy field dimmed noticeably. 1 million casualties for 6 miles of territory, and that was just one battle in one war using what we now consider primitive weapons, Sarah continued. The humans involved in this conflict genuinely believed they were fighting for their civilization's survival. When humans believe they're facing extinction, the normal rules of conduct become flexible. She brought up another image, this one showing a weapon that looked deceptively simple. This is called a flamethrower. It projects burning liquid over a range of about 50 meters. We had to ban using these against civilians, but they remained legal for military use because they were considered effective for clearing fortified positions. Scholar Zeketh made a sound that the translation system couldn't properly interpret. You created weapons specifically designed to burn other humans alive? Oh, that's just chemical fire. Would you like to see what we did with napalm? It's a kind of burning gel that sticks to whatever it touches and can't be extinguished with water. very effective against jungle positions, though the civilian casualties in Vietnam led to some uncomfortable international discussions. The chamber's environmental systems began working harder as several species' stress responses triggered changes in their atmospheric requirements. Ambassador Thexlar's wings had folded tightly against his body. "Captain, please, I think we understand that humans have developed intense methods of warfare." "No, I don't think you do understand," Sarah said, her voice taking on a harder edge. "You're thinking of these as aberrations, extreme responses to extreme situations. But this is just Tuesday for humans. We've been doing this to each other for our entire recorded history, and we've gotten very, very good at it." She activated a display showing a seemingly innocuous object. "This is a cluster bomb. When it explodes, it scatters hundreds of smaller bombs over a wide area, very effective against personnel in the open. The problem is that some of the smaller bombs don't explode immediately. They just sit there, waiting for someone to step on them. Children, mostly, since kids are curious about strange objects." Director Volnash's bark creaked ominously. "Your species created weapons that continue killing long after battles end." "We created weapons that continue killing long after wars end," Sarah corrected. "Land mines can remain active for decades. There are still areas of Earth that are uninhabitable because of unexploded ordnance from conflicts that ended before my grandparents were born." The chamber's lighting seemed to dim as the full implications began sinking in. "Council Prime Veltar managed to project a weak thought. But these treaties you mentioned, surely they've eliminated such practices?" Sarah's laugh was entirely without humor. "The Geneva Convention prohibits the use of land mines designed to injure rather than kill, because apparently making someone suffer for life was considered worse than just killing them outright. It took us until 1997 to get most nations to agree to ban anti-personnel mines entirely, and several major powers still haven't signed that treaty." She paused, studying the horrified faces around her. "And before you ask, yes, we had to specify design to injure rather than kill, because some humans were deliberately creating mines that would maim rather than kill enemy soldiers. The theory was that wounded soldiers require more resources to care for than dead ones." The ethereal representative's energy field was now barely visible. "Your species calculated the resource cost of different types of casualties?" "We calculate the resource cost of everything. We've mathematically optimized killing, analyzed the psychological impact of different weapon types, and developed entire academic disciplines around the most efficient methods of destroying enemy forces while preserving our own." Sarah brought up a final image, this one showing what appeared to be a simple metal tube. "This is called a shaped charge. It uses precise engineering to focus an explosion in a specific direction, allowing a relatively small amount of explosive to penetrate thick armor. We developed this technology during World War II specifically to destroy enemy tanks." She looked around the chamber, taking in the stunned expressions. The key word there is specifically. "We didn't stumble across this technology or adapt it from peaceful purposes. We sat down and deliberately figured out how to make explosions more efficient at killing people." Ambassador Thexlar's voice was barely a whisper. "How many of these weapons have your species created? How long do you have?" Sarah asked conversationally, "Because we've been at this for a while now, and humans are remarkably creative when it comes to finding new ways to apply lethal force. Would you like to hear about nuclear weapons, or should I start with biological warfare? Chemical weapons are always popular, or we could discuss the various ways we've weaponized diseases." The chamber erupted in chaos as multiple alien delegations began urgent communications with their home worlds. Emergency protocols activated as threat assessments were rapidly recalculated. In the center of it all, Captain Sarah Chun stood calmly, hands still clasped behind her back, waiting for the pandemonium to subside. When the noise finally died down, she spoke into the stunned silence with the voice of someone delivering a routine briefing. "And that, representatives of the Galactic Federation, is why humans consider our current military technology to be the restrained, civilized option. Everything I've shown you today represents what we do when we're playing by the rules. The reclassification, the emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council convened in unprecedented secrecy 3 hours after Captain Chen's presentation. The chamber, normally a place of dignified debate, buzzed with barely controlled panic as delegates huddled in species-specific groups, their translators working overtime to convert terror into diplomatic language. Ambassador Thexlar, his usually iridescent wing membranes now a dull gray, called for order. Fellow beings, we face a crisis unlike any in Federation history. The human species appears to represent a level of martial sophistication that our threat assessment protocols were never designed to evaluate. Council Prime Veltar's crystalline form had maintained a deep crimson hue since Chen's departure. His thoughts projected with unusual urgency. Our xenosociologists have completed their preliminary analysis of the human presentation. The implications are disturbing. Dr. Kethmore, the Federation's leading expert in species integration, floated forward on her anti-gravity platform. Her tentacled form writhed with agitation as she spoke. In 40 years of studying emerging species, I have never encountered a civilization that has systemized warfare to this degree. The humans haven't just developed weapons. They've created an entire philosophical framework around the application of lethal force. Scholar Zeketh clicked his mandibles nervously. The most troubling aspect is their casual attitude toward what they term collateral damage. They seem to accept civilian casualties as an inevitable consequence of military action. Worse than that, interjected Director Valnash, his bark now almost black with distress. They've developed mathematical models to optimize the ratio of enemy casualties to friendly losses. They treat warfare like an engineering problem to be solved through research and development. The ethereal representative, whose energy field had remained dimmed since the presentation, pulsed weakly. What disturbs me most is their historical progression. These weapons weren't developed in response to external threats. Humans created them specifically to use against other humans. They've spent millennia perfecting the art of killing their own species. Ambassador Thexlar spread his wings for attention. Dr. Kethmore, what do our psychological profiles suggest about human motivations? Surely their behavior can be explained by some evolutionary quirk. The xenosociologist's tentacles curled tightly. That's just it, Ambassador. Their behavior isn't aberrant, it's highly adaptive. Every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, every strategic innovation represents a logical response to environmental pressures. The problem is that their environment has consistently included other humans trying to kill them. The Geneva Convention protocols they mentioned, added Council Prime Veltar, suggest they've actually been restraining themselves. The weapons and tactics they described as banned imply the existence of even worse alternatives. A new voice entered the discussion as Admiral Quextau, the Federation's military commander, materialized via hologram. His crystalline exoskeleton gleamed with embedded neural interfaces. I've completed a tactical analysis of the human presentation. My staff and I have reached a disturbing conclusion. The chamber fell silent, waiting for the military expert's assessment. Every weapon system in the Federation arsenal is designed to disable, contain, or temporarily incapacitate enemy forces. Our entire military doctrine is based on the assumption that opponents are rational actors who will surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Admiral Quextal's image flickered as he paused. The humans have developed their weapons under the assumption that their enemies will never surrender, never negotiate, and never stop fighting until they are physically incapable of continuing. Their military technology isn't designed to win battles, it's designed to eliminate threats permanently. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Finally, Scholar Zeketh voiced what everyone was thinking. What happens when a species optimized for total warfare encounters our restrained military doctrine? We lose. Admiral Quextau replied bluntly, quickly and completely. A human military force would interpret our non-lethal weapons as a sign of weakness and respond with proportional escalation. By the time we realized our mistake, it would be far too late to adapt. Dr. Kethmore's tentacles writhed more frantically, but surely they wouldn't attack Federation members without provocation? Their diplomatic representatives seem reasonable enough. That's another troubling aspect, Ambassador Thexlar said, consulting his notes. Captain Chin wasn't threatening us. She was educating us. From her perspective, she was explaining why humans consider their current military capabilities to be restrained and civilized. The chamber doors dilated, admitting Captain Chin herself. The assembled delegates recoiled instinctively as she approached the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent space. Representatives, she said, her voice calm and professional, I've been monitoring your emergency session, as is standard protocol for military advisors during threat assessment reviews. I thought you might have questions. Ambassador Thexlar's wings trembled slightly. Captain Chun, your presentation has caused considerable concern among the Federation members. We're trying to understand the implications of human military capabilities. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I suspected it might. That's why I wanted to address a few misconceptions before they became official policy. She activated her portable hologram projector, displaying what appeared to be a simple organizational chart. This is the command structure for Earth's planetary defense forces. What you see here represents approximately 15% of human military capability. The alien delegates exchanged horrified glances. Council Prime Veltar managed to project a weak thought. 15%? The forces assigned to off-world operations and first contact scenarios, Sarah confirmed. The remaining 85% is dedicated to homeland defense and what we euphemistically call strategic deterrence. Strategic deterrence? Dr. Kethmore asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really want to know the answer. Weapons systems designed to ensure that if humanity faces extinction, we don't face it alone. Sarah's matter-of-fact delivery made the statement even more chilling. We learned a long time ago that the best way to prevent total war is to make absolutely certain that everyone understands the consequences of starting one. She brought up another display, this one showing what appeared to be a peaceful orbital station. This is Defense Platform 7, one of 43 similar installations in Earth's solar system. Each platform is equipped with what we call planet crackers, kinetic impactors, capable of rendering a world uninhabitable. The chamber's environmental system struggled to cope as multiple species simultaneously triggered stress responses. Scholar Zeketh's voice was barely audible. You have 43 planet-killing weapons? That's just the ones in our home system, Sarah replied conversationally. The deep space installations are classified, but I can tell you that human expansion has included the establishment of similar defensive networks around every system we've colonized. Admiral Quextal's hologram flickered with urgency. Captain, surely these weapons are intended for defense against external threats? Some unknown alien menace. Sarah's smile was cold and absolutely terrifying. Admiral, humans don't build weapons for hypothetical threats. Every system I've described was developed to use against other humans. The fact that we're now willing to use them against alien threats should probably be considered progress. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of multiple alien governments being contacted for emergency consultations. Finally, Ambassador Thexlar found his voice. Captain Chun, given these revelations, how should the Federation proceed with human integration? The same way you'd proceed with any other species, Sarah replied. Evaluate our capabilities, assess our intentions, and make your decision based on facts rather than assumptions. She paused, studying the terrified faces around her. But if I might offer a suggestion, when you're updating humanity's threat classification in your databases, you might want to include a note about something we call mutually assured prosperity, which is, Council Prime Veltar asked weakly, the human philosophy that everyone benefits more from cooperation than from conflict. We prefer to trade rather than conquer, to build rather than destroy, to explore rather than dominate. Sarah's expression softened slightly. But we've learned that maintaining peace requires being prepared for war. And when humans prepare for war, we prepare very, very thoroughly. Dr. Kethmore's tentacles had gone completely still, and if the Federation were to reject human membership, then humanity would continue expanding on its own, establishing our own trade networks, our own alliances, our own sphere of influence. Sarah's tone remained perfectly diplomatic. We'd regret missing the opportunity to learn from your advanced civilizations, but we understand that not every relationship is meant to be. The implications were clear to everyone in the chamber. Humanity didn't need the Federation's approval to become a galactic power. They were asking to join as equals, not supplicants. Ambassador Thexlar's wings rustled with what might have been resignation. Captain, what would humanity require for full Federation membership? The same things any species requires: mutual respect, fair trade agreements, and the understanding that our defensive capabilities are exactly that, defensive. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since her presentation began, it reached her eyes. We're not interested in conquering the galaxy. We're interested in being part of it. But you could conquer it if you chose to. Scholar Zeketh asked, though he seemed to already know the answer. Scholar, humans have a saying, walk softly and carry a big stick. We prefer to solve problems through negotiation and compromise. But yes, if pushed to extinction, we would make very sure we didn't go quietly. The chamber erupted in frantic communications as species representatives updated their governments on humanity's status. In the center of it all, Captain Sarah Chun stood calmly, hands clasped behind her back, waiting for the galaxy to make its choice point 3 hours later. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would be granted immediate full membership in the Galactic Federation, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The amendment to add a "Please don't provoke the humans" clause to the Federation Charter passed by an even wider margin. Captain Chun departed the station aboard her transport. She activated her communicator to contact Earth Command. Mission accomplished, General. The Federation has accepted our membership application. Integration will proceed as planned. A pause as she listened to the response from Earth. No, sir. I didn't have to show them the really classified stuff. The historical overview was sufficient. Another pause. Yes, sir, I made sure to emphasize our preference for diplomatic solutions. They seem quite eager to keep us happy. As her ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, Captain Chen smiled and began composing her after-action report. The galaxy was about to become a much more interesting place, and for the first time in human history, they wouldn't be the most dangerous thing in their neighborhood. They'd just convinced everyone else to make sure it stayed that way.